Hello, my loves. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Dustina. This is Spiritually Bougie Astrology, and we are going to do a meditative rant video in regards to the Mars rebirth and do a comparison to it against a prior eclipse that had occurred, as well as some of the things that I've been able to pick up that this energy is going to be launching us towards moving forward, is going to quickly challenge us with moving forward. Like, we have something that's coming to light, coming to the surface, being debuted, being exposed, being announced, an act or an action that is coming to the surface this week based off of the new moon in Scorpio that we just had, because of its opposition to Uranus, because of its conjunction to Mars. We had an energy that started the week that way, and then by the end of the week, we have the actual Mars rebirth that's going to happen. But that Mars rebirth that happens, it happens at an eclipse point. And I said in the week ahead video, like, look, some of where we're going this week, I am blocked. I can't see it all. I haven't gotten all the downloads. The reason I say those types of things is because I'm a firm believer in free will. And I believe that until certain decisions are made and the human effect of certain situations happen, that until those things occur, not everything is set in stone. There's a big portion of life that can very much be a dice game. We make certain decisions and then we have a follow through from them. We don't make a decision. Well, it's still making a decision, but we decide not to do something. And there's still going to be an after effect. There's still going to be a repercussion. There's still going to be a conclusion. There's still something that comes from it. But until those decisions are made, until all of the opportunities involved come to light, come to the surface, we don't get all the things that we need to. So I said in the week ahead forecast, like, I'm slightly blocked as to where we're going, but I did start to see some additional patterns into where we're going, and I'll kind of end the episode with those. But the main thing I want to go into now is just kind of a comparison of this Mars rebirth against the May 15th, 2022 full moon eclipse that happened in Scorpio. And I have more than one reason why I'm locked on to that date. And ironically, both have to do with Mars. Both have to do with Mars. Now, if you've listened to me for a while, I started saying this back during June. Specifically, it was the Sagittarius full moon that happened at the beginning of June, that the terminology that came through my meditation at that time was Mars conjunctions. And when I think back on that, we've already started to see some very interesting things happen based off of Mars conjunction, because we had our first one. The first one occurred on October 29th, right alongside that full moon eclipse, that out of sign eclipse that we had in Taurus. Because after that eclipse was perfected, we had the Mars-Mercury conjunction in the opposition to Jupiter. And many of us that weekend, whether it was based off of the Mars-Jupiter opposition, the Mercury-Jupiter opposition, because it was Mars-Mercury conjunction, whether it was the actual eclipse itself, or whether it was something going on like in the build up to that time span or right immediately afterwards, we had some things that came through in our lives. We either had profound conversations, we saw the result of somebody else's decisions and how that affected people all the way around. We've seen certain things in regards to, like, Congress, whenever they decided to go ahead and pick a Speaker of the House. That one still makes me laugh every time I think about it, but we've seen certain things that corresponded to that energy. When Mars and Mercury had their first conjunction, that was the first planetary conjunction to Mars in 14 months. The last ones that occurred happened back at the 1st of August in 2022. It was August 1st, 2nd, 3rd. Mars, Uranus, the North Node, they had a triple conjunction right there in Taurus at 18 degrees. And then Mars went into Gemini, where it stayed for 18 months. And with exception to the moon, we had no planetary conjunctions for 14 months until October 29th. The Mercury-Mars conjunction, we get 3 waves of. We had the first one. We'll have another one that's going to happen at the end of December, and we will have a third one that is going to happen at the end of January. So there are layers to that Mercury-Mars conjunction that as we get closer to each one, I'll do more emphasis on them. But this Sun-Mars conjunction results in a Mars rebirth. And you guys have heard me say this for a while. Mars and the Sun only have a conjunction once every 2 years. Once every 2 years. I just said that Mars didn't have any planetary conjunctions for 14 months. And all of a sudden, after we have an eclipse, this Venus ruled eclipse season, we go into these back-to-back-to-back-to-back Mars conjunctions. And I'm saying back-to-back in the sense of like, you go from 14 months of dry Sahara desert for Mars. It's been a very stagnant, slow season for Mars-ruled people. Us Mars-ruled people, we've been seeing a lot of activity and actions going on for a lot of other people. But really, it hasn't always included us. Because again, there wasn't anything affecting us. But now, Mars-ruled people and Mars-activated people, they're starting to feel it. They're feeling the pressure. They're feeling the rush. They're feeling this busyness going on around them. They're feeling certain things in the body. They're starting to notice certain things. I said 2 weeks ago, watch out for Mars-Sun conjunction because it can, result in migraines. And then I had a migraine for a week. I was not trying to manifest that, but I totally did. And that's why I'm still in glasses right now because I'm not risking it. But what we're going to start doing, October 29th, we had the Mars-Mercury conjunction. This week, November 17th to 18th, depending on the time zone, for me, it starts on the 17th and ends on the 18th. But for a lot of people, it's all going to be on the 18th. But we have the Mars-Sun conjunction that starts up. And then the next one will be a Mars-Mercury. The next one is going to be a Mars-Pluto. Then the next one is going to be a Mercury-Venus-Mars. Then we're going to have a Mars-Saturn. Now the Mars-Saturn, I'm kind of clued into. And I feel like whatever occurs after this week, it's like we announce something, we have something come to light, we have something come to the surface, we have something that gets revealed, we have things that get recognized, we have certain things that come to light. Knowing that some part of what's coming to light isn't fully ready to do anything, can't fully take an action, but that doesn't mean that there won't be actions that follow. Now, back during July, when I did the nodal activation video of whenever the nodes change signs, I said then, the South Node going into Venus's sign, and then immediately afterwards, Venus going into the retrograde. That means for the majority of us, the last half of 2023 was meant to be a very big purging energy. And every single one of us has had some level of purging that we've had to do in our lives. We have cut off jobs. We have cut off friends. We have cut off clients. We have cut off family members. We have seen somebody's true colors and their narcissistic behavior, and we cut them out of our lives. We've seen people that were taking advantage of other people in ways that never should happen. And again, we removed ourselves. We withdrew, and we had, on multiple levels, in multiple ways, levels of purging that occurred in our daily life. Whether it was through people, whether it was through a place, whether we just completely removed ourselves from a place. Now, I'm not just talking about a business. I mean, like, I have a family member that uprooted his entire self and moved to an entire different state and didn't tell anybody he was moving. I got a message afterwards going, just so you know, like, well, I love you too. He's like, I didn't tell anybody. I just did it. I was like, oh, okay. That's what you needed to do. I get it. Oh, but we had to do these changes. And for some people, it was rapid change. For some people, it has not been rapid change. It has been a long, drawn-out process because we don't like change. And I've given you guys a hard time for that, for those that are like that. Now, for many people, after we get through this week's Mars rebirth, and after we find this new passion, this new drive, we recognize some level of a disruption. The sun sheds light. Mars is the god of war. Mars is a disruptive planet. And I've described this for many people before, but I'm going to do this description again because we are talking about Mars. Mars's disruption can go one of two routes. It is either chaotic disruption or pivotal disruption. We've all dealt with this in our lifetime, but nobody's quite put it in that moment, in that moment going, oh, this is totally like a Mars transit situation. But once you start to recognize the pattern, you'll recognize a Mars transit situation. So let's do an example of chaotic Mars. Chaotic Mars is we have a job opening. This is always an example I do with everybody. We have a job opening. You get all the resumes in, you get this one resume, and on paper, everything it's mint. They know how to use the software, they know the job description, they know the industry, they know everything about it. You call them in, they do an interview, they can answer all of the questions, they know all the right answers, and you call the references and everybody you talk to, yeah, they're the best guy ever. And then you hire them. And everything that was on that resume, it was a work of art. Work of art. You try to get them to start to use the software and you come to find out, oh, they never did anything past like one window in the software. They've never done the full aspects of this job before, but they knew enough to sound like they did. You start talking to them about their references and come to find out it's all their old smoking buddies from college. Like, they have absolutely no idea what this person is like in the workplace, but you fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. Now you have this person in a job position, and everything they touch turns to shit. Every time they work on something, it creates more issues, more work, and more drama for everyone else. It creates an energy where we always feel like we have to follow up behind somebody and figure out what the hell did you just do? And the chaos that ensues based off having to do and redo the same job over and 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 over again. It's and you have to make a choice. Do you actually take this person, train them, and try to make them a viable part of the company? Or do you bite the bullet and let them go? But everything in the meantime, everything they touch, chaotic. It creates chaos in the workplace. Sometimes you get in a relationship and, there's so much passion. But all in all, they're completely chaotic and their energy around you makes turmoil. That's all chaotic Mars. Now, on the flip side, there is pivotal Mars. You go to an event, you sit down with a speaker, and you have the most profound TED Talk moment. I think one of the ones that I really enjoyed was like listening to like Paul Stamets. I like to grow my own medicines and stuff. So Paul Stamets, whenever it came to like mushroom stuff, like his stuff is wonderful. The years of his experience is wonderful. So I like talking about him. But after you hear his perspective and hear that insight and you learn in that moment, what I love about learning is you can't unlearn it. Once it's ingrained, once it's in your muscle memory, it's there. Even if you don't do it again for 30 years, you go back. And once you start picking up that routine again, and like it all kind of like, oh yeah, yeah, I know all this. I'm good. You go through a moment in your life that's not chaotic, but it is so important to you. It sets a standard. And now everything that you do moving from there, this is a point of measurement. Whether it's a good measurement or a bad measurement, sometimes that's trauma, sometimes that is just like, nobody will ever live up to my best friend. He has set the standard for what a dude should be like. No. These are pivotal moments. Both are forms of Mars. As a Scorpio rising, as a Mars ruled individual, both are forms of Mars. We can either be the chaos that ensues nothing but turmoil within life, or we can be that person that just sets a standard of how to perform and how to react and how to do certain things and how to be in life. And it creates a new standard for people. Chaotic Mars or pivotal Mars, doesn't matter. Kind of depends on how you decide to work with that energy and how you process it once you go through these moments. You can either call it completely chaos or you can call it a learning lesson. Be like, oh, well, I'm not doing that again. Both are forms. Both are forms of Mars. We are going through a Mars rebirth. There will either be something this week within our lives that showcases chaos, disruption, or it's going to showcase something pivotal, a turning point like energy. And given the way the rest of the transits are going to go from here, I would argue that a lot of people are going to be in a pivotal energy. They just don't necessarily realize it. They don't necessarily know it. And because there is such a large buildup to the exact conjunction, and even after the exact conjunction, they're still going to be right on top of each other for a couple of weeks. Mars won't be completely out of the rays of the sun for a couple of months. We're going into an energy where some people aren't even going to realize that they're in a rebirth, that they're having new drive and new passion and new things come through. Like, they're not going to fully recognize it because of how prolonged it is. But really, whenever you have those hindsight moments, you can go back and go like, oh no, I remember that whole timeline was important because it showed me this. That whole timeline was important because it showed me this. But given this entire week, this week and going into next week, has this revealing, coming to light, debuting, acknowledging type of energy. Some people might struggle to, in the moment, to recognize their exact moment. And it might require like reflection coming later this month. And I do mean later, but not much later because of how these things are going to progress. Now, back in May of 2022, we had a full moon eclipse at 25 degrees of Scorpio. And this occurred May 15th, 2022 at 11:15 p.m. I will show you guys here in a minute. Simultaneous to that, we also had a Mars-Neptune conjunction. And this occurred at 24 degrees. 24 degrees of Pisces. That full moon, that particular eclipse was in a sextile to Pluto. It was in a square to Saturn. And it was in a trine to Neptune, while the ruler of that eclipse was coming into a conjunction with Neptune. Now, I am somebody that I meditate on the transits. I meditate on the energies as they're going through, and I try to pay a lot of attention. And I had very specific downloads for me at that time that came through. But not everybody was in a place of downloads and having like confusing energy hit them, because there was a bit of confusion. There was a bit of fogginess. The ruler of an eclipse was in a conjunction to Mars, or Mars was in a conjunction to Neptune. There was some confusion. There were some little clicks in the energy letting us know that something needed to shift and change, but it wasn't going to change all in all in this exact moment. That it wasn't even fully time for it to change because, again, that eclipse was in a square to Saturn. And shortly after that eclipse, Saturn turned retrograde, We were very, very close to something. We arrived at something. We activated something in that eclipse that hadn't had the chance to fully come through, to fully expand, to fully take shape. But it will if given enough time. We're a year and a half later. That's a lot of time. Many of us have been working on things over the course of the last year and a half. Many of us have been putting things in motion. We started writing books. We started podcasts. We started companies. We switched something in our companies. We went to new positions. We started to work on certain things. We started to deal with certain things. Some of us had to deal with health things. We had things in regards to our own health or somebody on our immediate surroundings and their health that came to light, that came to the surface. And whatever came through in that time was, in one way, a distraction. Mars conjunct Neptune. In one way, a distraction. But in other ways, it was like I don't want to call it a pressure test. I want to say, how do I want to word this? We had to stretch. It's like a taffy pulling situation. We knew things that we wanted. We knew things that we wanted to do, but we hadn't had enough stretching, testing, wherewithal to build the stamina for what we needed. So in lieu of giving us what we wanted, and considering that was the start of the Scorpio eclipses at that time, we had already had 2 Taurus eclipses when we finally had our first Scorpio eclipse. We weren't ready for things. We needed to have some things worked out. Taffy pulling is what I keep picturing, by the way. It's just like all the taffy, stringy stuff. Some of us, it was about understanding our tenacity and understanding where we needed to change some things. Some of us, we did something during that time that sealed our fate in a good way or in a negative way. There have been some people that they started to do some very shady things through that eclipse season, and they had a lot of follow through that continued out. They came to a point where they could have made certain decisions to stay the course, or they could do something out of the norm. And those that try to do something out of the norm, if they didn't stay on top of themselves, if they just trusted blind fate, they didn't really go their way. But if they stayed the course and they didn't just leap at every single little thing that just kind of wiggled its tail at them, if they didn't, fall for every pothole, every trick in the book, then a whole different energy is coming to a manifestation in this Mars rebirth. But that manifestation was still an energy that started back in 2022. So what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you the full moon eclipse. Then I'm going to layer the current charts on top of that and show you where I'm seeing the similarities, but also where I'm seeing some of the differences. And those differences clue us in to where we need to pay attention to things next. So let's take a look at the screen. Okay. FME full moon eclipse. Scorpio 2022. May 15th, 2022 at 11:15 p.m. The ascendant was in Capricorn. We have the moon 25 degrees, 18 minutes. The south node was at 22 degrees, 31 minutes. Across the sky, of course, the sun is always supposed to be across from the moon for us to have a full moon. But being within that 15-degree range of the nose is what makes it the eclipse. This eclipse occurred right after Mercury had turned retrograde. So literally the way it worked was May 10th, Mercury turned retrograde. At this time, Mercury hadn't even started moving yet. And then May 11th, Jupiter entered Aries. You can see Jupiter right here. Now, the rulers of this eclipse, again, Pluto, 28 degrees. Hey guys, does anybody know where Pluto's at right now? Right now? 28 degrees. There you go. The other ruler, Mars, was entering a conjunction with Neptune at 24 degrees of Pisces. The similarities that I'm looking at are the fact that Pluto is at the same point of the sky. Neptune is retrograding back to the same point of the sky. Mercury at that time was in its domicile, but it was retrograde. So we had a turn in our mind. We had a shift in our ideas. We had something coming through that we had a good idea, but in some way, shape, or form, it required a rethinking, a redoing, a revising, and we were just in the start of a revision energy at the start of that Mercury retrograde during this eclipse. So again, first eclipse in the 18-month cycle that was tied to Scorpio. And the first eclipse is showing you where we have a shakeup. It does not show you where we're going to have the gains, especially because the South Node was the one in Scorpio. Through the next two eclipse seasons, Mars didn't make any planetary conjunctions. So when I said before, Mars going through Scorpio right now and going through its rebirth energy right now and crossing all of those eclipse points, we are culminating a lot of different timelines and a lot of different energies all into the same timeline. Mars again was one of the rulers of that eclipse. Mars was coming into a conjunction with Neptune. Take a look at your calendars. We all have different ways of how we do things. Take a look at your calendars. What kind of appointments, what kind of business meetings, what kind of things were you doing in mid-May of 2022? What kind of things happened in your personal life? What kind of things happened with your family in mid-May of 2022? Where did you have some shakeups and endings? Be aware of those types of things. Given that this eclipse was in a square to Saturn, Saturn was slowing down, Saturn was about to turn retrograde, Saturn in its own domicile, being in Aquarius, slowing down, being very, very rigid in its thought process. Even though we had some level of rethinking with the Mercury retrograde, we had a rigidity in a lot of ways whenever it came to authority figures, when it came to elders, when it came to certain people in our lives. There was a rigid effect that, no, I don't want to change. Saturn rules time, and Saturn was about to turn retrograde. It's not time to change. Please note how I said that, because that's going to be one of those similarities that's in the opposite now. Now, I'm going to add a layer. So the full moon eclipse chart is going to shrink down to the center. We're now treating it basically like a birth chart, and we're going to fast forward this to the 17th, 18th time frame, but later in the evening to make this more exact. Okay. November 17th, I've got this at 11:41 p.m. Central Standard Time. The Sun and Mars have just started their conjunction at 25 degrees. The Sun and Mars are on top of that eclipse point. This is why one of the reasons why I was looking at everything. Mars is one of the rulers of Scorpio. The other ruler of Scorpio is Pluto. Pluto is back at 28 degrees. This will be the last time of Pluto being at 28 degrees This timeline of where we have it, so that's like the rest of November. This will be the last time of Pluto at 28 degrees. We will not experience this again in our lifetime. This will be the last time of Neptune at the 24-degree mark. We will not experience this again in our lifetime. There were things that were activating in May of 2022 that were activating, that now we've had a whole slew shifting of energy that is going to take us into something new, because we've had an entire year and a half, just rounding it out now, year and a half to prepare, to switch gears, to shift, to go through tests. We went through the taffy pulling machine, and all of our limbs have been stretched out a little bit. We worked some kinks out. Some of us, we actually worked some kinks out. Some of us created new kinks in the body. Kind of depends on where we're at in life. We've gone through things in the last year and a half. Now, let's talk about Saturn. At that time, Saturn was in its own domicile. It was in the fixed air sign. This is the way I believe. This is the way that I think. This is the way that I see it. I'm not changing. Saturn's not in that place anymore. Instead of being in the fixed, stubborn air sign, for those that are Aquarius placements, I'm very sorry if you get all salty for me just doing it. I'm using this as an example. Saturn's not in that place anymore. And since March of this year, Saturn has been in Pisces. And there has been this energy towards changing things with the elders, changing things with our authority figures, changing responsibilities, shifting them. There were things that were presented over the course of most of this year, specifically since March, that has made people aware of shifts. And some of us have already seen these shifts. We've seen the diehard employee that's worked for the company for 45 years has finally retired. We've seen things going on with our elders and showing us that it's time to transition, that they don't need to be the one that's caring for everybody anymore, that it's time to care for grandpa. And many of you have heard me say those exact words, like it's time for us to change our roles, ascend into who we are now. And we've been in this energy and in this process of this ascension. The Sun-Mars conjunction happening at that eclipse point is solidifying, clearing space, ending one cycle, a cycle that specifically started in 2021, while also starting a new cycle. Now, the last time we had a Sun-Mars conjunction, it was in Libra. Yeah, I've talked about that with you guys before. That was in a cardinal sign. That was in a starting sign. But we didn't have the eclipse axis, really emphasizing anything. We didn't have some of the energies that we have now to solidify certain things. The types of energy that come through, that arrives, that is seen going into the rest of November, because I'm just going to round it out. We've already been in it. We've already been coming to terms with things. We've already had things coming to light. We've already had things come to the surface. We're already in it. This is the most hyperized week, the week that I'm recording this. This is the exact moment, November 17th, going into the 18th. There is this energy of recognition and falling into place, but this is for a long-term setup, long-term energy. We don't get, again, let me say it this way. We get one Sun-Mars conjunction once every 2 years. We will not have another Sun-Mars conjunction in Scorpio for 32 years. It's 2023. The next one is in 2055. There's your math. We are setting something up that is meant to be a long-term energy. long-term pivotal placements. But we got inklings. We got an idea. We had things placed in front of us back in May of 2022 that speaks to the energy that is being solidified around us right now. I have been saying, once we had Mercury go into Sagittarius, we are all going into uncharted territory. We've had Mercury in Sag for about a week now. We've all been dealing with something that's new to us in some way, that's foreign to us in some way. We're going to some place and we're learning a whole new way of doing things. We're in the new company. We're communicating with people we've never communicated with before. We're transiting into places or in a new vehicle that we've never dealt with before. Like, I've always drove a stick shift because I'm old school about everything. But now I'm in an automatic for the first time and I kind of realize it's not that bad. We're in foreign energy. We're in uncharted territory as this new energy is solidifying. This doesn't have to be a bad thing. But again, we're probably going to make some mistakes because, again, we're in uncharted territory. Neptune is in the same place that it was a year and a half ago. Pluto, one of the rulers of Scorpio, is in the same place it was a year and a half ago. But these will be the last time these two planets are there. Now let's talk about what Pluto represents. Pluto, I always like to talk, when I do this more in my readings, but this is a meditative rant video and it doesn't really matter what I put into this one so much. So this is more meant to be informational and helping people. When each of the outer planets were discovered, there were things in the real world that corresponded with their discoveries. When Uranus was discovered in the 1700s, we had the first revolutions and we had the first attempts of overthrowing monarchies. The two big ones that all of us will recognize very, very quickly. There was the American Revolution, and out of the colonies you go. We will not be under the rulership of a king or of a monarchy. We are going to create a democracy. American Revolution. The French Revolution also occurred around the same time that Uranus was discovered. And that monarchy was overthrown. Now they had to test some waters a little bit because they had always been a monarchy, and they went from a monarchy to a dictatorship. They tried to go back to a monarchy and everybody's like, no, I don't like that. We just don't like it. And then ultimately they changed into where they are now, which is more of a democratic republic type thing. I'm not French, so I might have screwed that up a little bit. But I know they're not a monarchy anymore. That's for sure. Not the way that it used to be. Even the English government was overthrown for a while. And there were an English king and queen that actually had to take refuge out of England. Because again, there were revolutions and people were tired of being ruled by one dude. Why does one dude get to make all the rules? He's not the one doing everything. And we had these giant shifts in government. Saturn is associated with the government. We had to revolutionize things. We had to evolve. After the discovery of Uranus, so too was their evolution in other ways specifically tied to science. Uranus doesn't play a part in this part, but I like to do on my step-by-step. When Neptune was discovered in the 1800s, Neptune was actually roughly in this area of the sky that it's in right now, in Pisces, ironically enough. This last 10 or so years of Neptune in Pisces is the first time in recorded history that one of the rulers of Pisces is in the sign of Pisces. We didn't know what Pisces was, we didn't know what Neptune was going to represent when Pisces was, well, I did not say that right. We did not know what Neptune was going to represent when Neptune was discovered. It was not associated immediately with the sign of Pisces. They needed time for it to be understood. Now, one of the things I like about Neptune is the way it was discovered. All the other planets were discovered by the naked eye. Uranus was discovered through a telescope. Somebody realized, oh, that's not a fixed star, that's a moving star. And then once we realized that Uranus was not, a fixed star, then they started going back and realizing they could calculate the magnetics of that planet. And they realized that there was another planet past Uranus. And they started looking for it. But based off of the naked eye, based off of telescope, they could not find it. Where is it? 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 The way Neptune was ultimately discovered was not through the traditional means. And this speaks a lot to Neptune's energy. Once they were able to start calculating the magnetic poles, ultimately the way Neptune was discovered was through mathematics. We had to make the math make sense. Neptune was the first planet that was discovered through a mathematic calculation because it did not like to be seen. It did not like to be understood. It did not like to be known for traditional things. Neptune had to be discovered in a whole different way. In the 1800s, when Neptune was discovered, there was a boom in mystics and mystical occult-like things. And because of the revolutions that had actually occurred through the 1700s, this allowed for those things to finally happen in the 1800s. There was an influx of sideshows and circuses and the gypsy turns, and these weren't stigmatized for a while. There was also huge changes in medicines, but the thing is nobody knew what the hell they were doing with it. How many of you have seen those old pill bottles or medicine bottles that said this much cocaine, this much THC, and who gave it to them? The doctor. He's just like, oh, here, this will make you feel better. Oh, he was right. But the other thing that we didn't understand was also addictions. And there can be things tied to addiction with Neptune. Medicines, addiction, things that are not immediately cleared, that do not immediately make sense. A lot of those original occult type things were scams. People figured out ways to scam other people for money. It was very common to have those people that sold the snake oil. Oh, the snake oil. Neptune. The rise of Neptune. I think if you think back to that in history and where we're at now, there's a whole different form of like scams that are just at a boom. And over the next 2 years, as Saturn gets closer to Neptune, that's going to get the people that have been thinking they're going to keep getting away with everything. They're not. They're not. Over the next 2 years, there's going to be a hard hammer on a lot of that stuff. Just like there was back then. Just like there was back then. When Pluto was discovered, it corresponded to two major awarenesses that I like to think of in the modern day. Two of them. One, when Pluto was discovered, Oppenheimer was working on the atomic bomb. Mars is the god of war. He is the infantry. He is the man on the field. He wants to fight. I always look at Saturn. Sometimes I make jokes that he's Daddy Saturn, but Saturn is Eisenhower. He is the general. And he is looking at how to strategically win the war. He's making the long-term plays. Mars gets dirty, bloody, and muddy, and all that other stuff. But Saturn he's playing Risk. He's playing chess. Pluto's energy is transformative. Now, sometimes that transformation can be through underground means, that I have a reason I'm saying it that way, or through trauma. And both are reflective to to things that occurred when Pluto was discovered. The key element of the atomic bomb, once it was created, was named plutonian, because it corresponded to the discovery in the same timeline. Planet was discovered, plutonian. One and the same. Pluto ends wars. Pluto's the atomic bomb. Pluto ends wars. Once the atomic bombs went off, To say they completely transformed the landscape in the way that Japan was seen in this world is an understatement. To say that once those atomic bombs went off, that they transformed the way that power was held in this world. America became a superpower after they put off those atomic bombs. There's no disputing it. Pluto ends wars. But other things that started to occur in the 1930s was the psychological research and how certain elements and certain things were affecting the body, and how we can take those elements and we can overcome them. Psychology really started to have a whole different type of boom. There was discoveries specific to I'm going to say for nowadays it would be alternative medicine, but the couple that went to Mexico and actually like in mainstream level discovered like the first magic mushrooms, that corresponded with the same timeline as whenever Pluto was discovered. When the first medicines were starting to be tinkered with and created to, help people work through PTSD and work through trauma, that all corresponded in the same timeline as whenever Pluto was discovered. So sometimes whenever you guys hear me say Pluto can be about transformation, sometimes physical transformation, sometimes internal transformation, sometimes it's about trauma. These are all Plutonian things. We are back at a point of transformation. We are back at a point of trauma. We are back at a point, these are Pluto things. We are back at a point during this Mars rebirth of transforming something, of taking on a new effect, of looking at something with a new, fresh set of eyes. Neptune. We have a clearer sight towards something now than what we did before. At the time of that eclipse, Mars and Neptune were in a conjunction. We didn't know what we were getting into. We didn't know how big our actions were going to be. We didn't know losing someone or losing something or breaking away or what we were starting to transform into. We didn't know. Mars conjunct Neptune. However, fast forward 18 months, we know. Now it's the Sun's conjunction to Mars. But this Sun-Mars conjunction, this Mars rebirth, is in a trine to Neptune. There were things that we started, things that we began to deal with, things that we were experiencing, things that we were being triggered by, that we were wanting to instigate more energy, but for whatever reason, it could not happen at that time, and we ran into roadblocks. We ran into issues because it wasn't time. We weren't full steam ahead at that time. However, in this Mars rebirth, we will be full steam ahead. And that is spoken based off of the fact that Saturn, the ruler of time, the ruler of karma, is not like where he was before. Saturn and Mercury are inverse. They're opposite of the standpoint of where they were back then. Mercury had just turned retrograde. Mercury was in its own domicile. It was in Gemini. And we were rethinking of something, and whatever we were thinking, we thought we were right. People were trying to get us to look at things, trying to get us to do things, trying to make something happen. And rigidity, based off of Saturn being in Aquarius, being in a fixed air sign, rigid. We had a rigid effect. We had something telling us, this is not the way it's going to go. It's not the right time. I'm not going to do this with you. And little by little, what has happened over the course of the last year and a half has been shifts and change. Business partners have changed. People, again, have changed companies. People had to take a step back from a relationship going, no, I don't want this right now. I'm not ready for this. And little by little, people are starting to come back around going, I was wrong. I was wrong. I shouldn't have been that way. I shouldn't have done it. But in the meantime, we've had other things that have occurred that have either strengthened us, gave us more dexterity because we've had more flexibility while rolling through the taffy machine, or they've put something else in play because we needed a certain thing to play out karmically over the last year and a half. In March, Saturn entered Pisces, plunged into Pisces, went to 8 degrees in June, turned retrograde, has came back to 0 degrees. And since the beginning of November, I think it was November 10th, 11th, was right as Pluto was turning direct. And that was October 10th. So since October 10th, Saturn has been at this 0 degrees of Pisces. A mutable sign, a changeable sign. Many of us are starting something over. We've been in the process over the last month of starting something new, starting something over, taking on new authority, taking on a new role, ascending into something. Many of us, we're for the first time ever taking care of our parents. Many of us are seeing just how well us taking care of our parents is starting to work out for them. We've alleviated a stress of a responsibility for them because we've reversed it. Some of us are raising our parents. And if you're just at the start of this, just wait, it gets really fun. Some of us are seeing the benefits of putting a whole different level of healing into the timeline. A whole different way of thinking, a whole different way of communicating, an empathetic nature that is starting to soften those Saturnian people. It's softening the boss. It's softening our elders. It's softening the authority figures. We're seeing a shift. For some people, that shift has to do with faith, because of what Pisces represents. For some of it has to do with empathy and healing. I've seen a bigger influx in people like leaning into their faith over the course of the last few years, but there has been a whole different level of influx of sticking towards that since earlier this year when Saturn went into Pisces. We are also transitioning our energy tied to faith and healing, where before we wanted to do something, but we were blind to the possibilities. We are no longer blind to them. And in fact, in many ways, people are starting to transition into a whole different mindset and into a whole different energy. Now, regretfully, we're not all drinking a special kind of Kool-Aid of anything, and I'm not making any type of negative joke on that one. We're not all like drinking out of the same cup. Some of us, where our beliefs are starting over, they can still be volatile. They can still be a headache. They can still have issues. Nobody is perfect. You've seen enough natal charts. Nobody's perfect. But there is something that we are all very much aware that we are transforming and starting over in the energy. Having Mercury in Jupiter's sign, Mercury's in its detriment. Mercury does not do well in Jupiter's signs because, again, where logic prevails, hope and faith usually don't. But right now, the energy that we're in, it's time for hope and it's time for faith. And if you're going from a point of following faith and hope, whether we realize it or not, we're going to likely make some mistakes. It's not that they're trying to be purposeful. It's a growing pain type energy. So there are things that are falling into place in the moment that have been a very, very long time coming. Now, next week. Ooh, is that next week? I have the numbers down, but I'm not realizing. It's the 16th. Look, over the rest of the month, I'm just going to do this way. It's not next week. It's right after. We're going to have the sun go into Sagittarius on the 22nd and square Saturn. And for a few days, we're going to be in an energy where we know we are doing something new and ending something at the same time. We're going into uncharted territory and completing something that from before. We're talking to new people and knowing simultaneously that we're leaving something behind. And then there's going to be the first test to this new energy, to this reborn energy. And that first test is specific to November 24th and 25th, when Mars enters its square with Saturn. One of the things that has come through for me in this week and in the meditation of like letting things kind of fall into place is that Saturn's energy in Pisces, Saturn's energy in this starting something new is very important. We're going to have a good 2-month span, basically, of having at least 4 to 5 planets in Jupiter signs. As soon as we start Sagittarius season, we're going to go from, right now Mercury is in Sag, Saturn is in Pisces, Neptune's in Pisces. So Saturn and Neptune, they're in Pisces no matter what for this part of the conversation. Right now we have 3 planets in Jupiter signs. But after November 22nd, it's going to go to 4. After November 24th, it's going to go to 5. Then it'll go back down to 4 on December 1st. I know. It'll go back down to 4. Then by the end of December, it'll go back up to 5. It'll go back down to 4 again. And then whenever we get into literally January 1st, we hit 5 again. There's a lot of emphasis for where we're going next as to what Jupiter in Taurus is really representing. And as we continue throughout the rest of this year, we are really stringing timelines together. We've attempted to do this before. We attempted to do it after the last eclipse season. But again, we were doing it with the wrong people. We were doing it in the wrong moment. We were doing it with the wrong things. We were doing it in the wrong place. Some element wasn't right. It didn't jive. It didn't vibe. It didn't fit. And over the course of the rest of the year, that energy was purged. Now we're going into the new energy. Whatever happens in this Mars rebirth energy, whatever happens in that Mars-Saturn square, it is going to have an effect with the next eclipse season. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the Libra full moon eclipse that we're going to have on March 25th includes a Venus-Saturn conjunction. The Aries new moon eclipse that we're going to have on April 8th includes a Mars-Saturn conjunction. Mars is going through a rebirth right now. And within 2 weeks of the rebirth, Mars hits a square to Saturn. That seems very telling. This Mars rebirth was on a full moon eclipse point in Mars' sign. That eclipse that occurred again on May 15th, as I showed you guys, was in a square to Saturn. It was not time to do something at that time, but it is now. All from July up until basically this last eclipse season, which ended during the new moon in Scorpio, based off the way that I calculate it. All of these last few months, so July, August, September, going through October, all of this timeline has had elements of purge, hyperactive purge, because of the Venusian rulership. and I'd said it months ago, I'm saying it again now, we were not meant to understand the full aspects of our gains and experience of where we're going to have growth, expansion and growth until after the Mars rebirth. This week is the Mars rebirth. The immediate energy after this is telling us it's time to kick something up a notch. And everything following this Mars rebirth is pivoting us to where something new, very big, is meant to begin in the next eclipse season, because in the next eclipse season, we have a new moon, and new moons usually herald new beginnings in a Mars-ruled sign. When we're having that new beginning in a Mars-ruled sign, the ruler, Mars, is going to be in a conjunction to Saturn. New things, new beginnings, new elements of time that are going to have big potential later on. If you have been in an energy over the course of the last 6 months, I'm just rounding it now, of like, it feels like everything is wrong and everything is holding you back and everything has been going in the wrong direction and everything has been a headache and everything has been a nightmare and everything's been draining the bank account and everything's been breaking and everything's just been going to shit. Handbasket. That's about to shift. That's about to change. It's not going to feel that way anymore. If you have been a Mars-ruled individual like myself and you have been like twiddling your thumbs like, when is this stagnant energy gonna end? It's ending. It's shifting. New things are coming to light. New things are coming to the surface. New things are starting to happen. All following this little conjunction of the Sun and Mars. I've known since June we need these Mars conjunctions to truly understand where we're going next, to truly have gains, to truly have the hope we wish to understand. We need the Mars conjunctions. The first one happened during the last eclipse on October 29th. The Sun-Mars conjunction instigates 2 timelines of energy, one for 32 years, one for 2 years. I'm not going to document everything out for 32 years. We got way too much stuff that's going to happen in the meantime. But we can all recognize that we're starting something that's going to be meaningful and specific for the next 2 years. The other thing that I want to bring up about the fact that the Sun with Mars's rebirth is it was preceded by that Mars-Uranus opposition. I didn't say this in the week ahead forecast. I actually forgot to say it, and I realized that later. That's the last Mars-Uranus opposition in these signs. Mars and Uranus will not oppose each other in Taurus and Scorpio again for 76 years, 76. The next time they have an opposition, Uranus will be in Gemini. There are very profound things that are going to culminate over the next 2 years. A lot of activity, a lot of industries. And I do mean industries. I really do mean that. There will be a lot of expansion in certain industries. And there are people that have struggled with finding their calling for quite some time, that once we get into some of the energies that are going to start to prevail at the end of this 2-year cycle, at the end of this Libra, the Libra Aries eclipse cycle, that's also going to herald whenever Neptune and Saturn start their conjunctions in Aries. There will be new industries. There will be new career paths. The traditional career path that so many people were taught from a young age, this is what you have to do to succeed. A lot of you are going to learn this is not what you needed to do to succeed. Mom and dad were wrong, and they were told wrong. And there will be an expansion of people that have to do more hands-on. I'm going to say grunt work because I'm a redneck and, you know, I'm a country girl and a redneck. But there will be shifts and adjustments in industries. Yes, there will be growth and expansion in AI. That's an easy one that anyone can talk about. But the thing is like, it's not just going to be AI. The trades, the actual trades. So electricians, HVAC, plumbers, these people that have been in trades, their industries have been dwindling to the point that now if you want to have a job that's going to pay you 6-figure salaries, you got to know a skill. And there will be a whole boom in the industry that if you are not a skilled worker, if you don't have an actual tactical skill of some sort that can be used in a multitude of ways, if you don't have this, then you won't be able to succeed. Our mindset of what industries are going to be the money makers, they're going to change. Right now, we're in the process of energetically lining out where those industry changes need to happen and how they're going to happen. Because again, we have to phase out old to make space for new. The thing is sometimes a lot of the people that are going into the new, that need to go into the new, they don't know their direction yet. But they will soon enough. That's what we have eclipse cycles for. They will soon enough. Okay. I love and appreciate every single one of you. Again, meditative rant videos are just something that's meant to be helpful. These are the things that I start to pick up on. I want to just go over the patterns. If this is helpful for you, that's great. If it's not anything that speaks to you at all, that's okay too. The way that I read and the way that I see things doesn't speak to everybody, and that's okay. But I still like to do things that I think are going to be helpful for those that are trying to learn astrology, because when you start to see the patterns and you start to see the commonalities, it makes it a lot easier to understand how to make predictions later. So I love and appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the support, and subscribe.